also wanted to discuss how we respond to being part of the World Heritage Site. That's what the flip charts at the back are all about that, but I'll talk about that a bit further in a minute. As you probably gathered, we're hoping that we can zoom this event out to the universe. And many thanks to Adam, who's never done this before, so please bear with us. It may or may not work. But we just wanted to record this for posterity and also to give people who can't get here an opportunity, because there was a lot of interest in today's event. So we're going to conduct today's meeting in both Welsh and English. And we're going to hear from Gwynedd, as I said. There'll be an opportunity to ask questions after Gwyneth's talk, if anybody's got questions. I was also hoping to invite some of you to add any memories or history that you might want to add. However, with this number of people, that's really not going to work terribly well, because we will just run out of time. So we might have to park that for a future event. But there will be an opportunity to have a bit of discussion, certainly about what Gwynedd has said. And then finally, we're going to invite you to contribute to the flip charts that are there at the back of the room. We started working on those, well, we've been working on them for some time, but we started with those at the last event, which was a month ago, of which there were only 5 people, as I said. And basically, we're asking you what your thoughts are about the World Heritage Site. First of all, we're asking, why is our community heritage so important to us all? And then, you know, what do you think the opportunities are from being part of the World Heritage Site, but also what are the threats? We'd also like to get some feedback from you about what you think the Community Heritage Project should do next. So we've got a series of suggestions. So when we get to that part, please feel free to add your own comments to the ones that are there already. And we've got sticky dots, as you know, to play with. So the green dots mean you think something is good, a good idea, and the red dot means you think it's a terrible idea. So feel free to add dots. I'm running out of the coloured dots, but there are some pens, so I've got some white dots, so you can make your own coloured dots. So that's the last part of today's event. I want to take this opportunity to just thank a number of people who've contributed to making this happen. Gwynedd, obviously, who's I think beginning to regret agreeing to do the talk. But we're very grateful to him for agreeing to do it. Sue for bringing the flasks, and also for being my backup, and Viv as well, wherever there's Viv as well, because I don't want to go on about this, but I have been a bit poorly, and so it was possible I wasn't going to be able to be here today. So Sue and Viv are there as backup, just in case they need to step in. So thanks to them. Adam for organising the Zoom, Jackie and Leanne for helping me distribute the leaflets. Andrew Lote, is Andrew here? Anyway, oh there. Andrew's been doing some translation for us on the Facebook page, so big thanks to him. And Mania Hughes, who can't be here today, but who's also done some translation for us in relation to this event. And Mike Distenson, who also can't be here, but he did the formatting of the flyers and printed them for us. And anybody else that I've forgotten, thank you very much. So, before I hand over to Gwynedd, I just want to say this, that through doing this work, what I've learned is that our personal heritage is very intertwined with our personal identities and our language. And we all feel very passionate if we feel that that's being disrespected, that our heritage or our language is being disrespected. And so can I politely request that when we do have discussion and we chat amongst ourselves afterwards, that we all do that with a mutual respect, and that we tread carefully when we're talking about people's heritage. We are a mixture of native Welsh speakers, Welsh learners, English-only speakers, and bilingual Welsh-English speakers here. But we wouldn't be here if we didn't all value our local Welsh heritage and the Welsh culture and language, and we all share that in this room. So we need to bear that in mind when we're moving forward. So feel free to contribute in the language of your choice. All will be welcomed and respected. If you'd like to offer your, speaking Welsh, speaking English, speaking both, entirely up to you, and all of that will be welcomed. We are hoping in the future to be able to provide simultaneous translation, but that's actually quite expensive, and at the moment we've got no funding, so we have to make do with what we can and just do our best in the circumstances we're in. So that's enough from me. If you don't want to be in the film, then you won't be in the film because you're not in the camera line, so that's all fine. So without further ado, I'd like to introduce Gwynedd, or at least invite Gwynedd to introduce himself, because he knows more about himself than I do.
Diolch, Jane. Prynawn da i gyd. Mae'r cyfarfod yn newid yn ddwyieithog, bilingual. Jane suggested I spoke for 20 minutes in Welsh and 20 minutes in English, and I said, the English people will have left before we finish the Welsh one. So it'll be bits in Welsh, bits in English, so hopefully you won't get too confused with it all. I lived I won't say most, a large part of my life in the village. I wasn't born here. I was born in Abergynolwyn before the Second World War. And during the war, my father, he worked in a quarry in Abergynolwyn. Then we moved to England because he couldn't find work in the slate quarry. So he worked near Liverpool at the beginning of the war, and we were there as little children. And my mother, she was born and brought up in the village here. She got fed up with the bombing there. We were very close to the bombing. And she said, I'm going back home. So we all came back here. And apparently the little cottage that we lived in there was bombed a few weeks after. So I've changed from Welsh to English now all the time. So we came back here and I lived here until I moved to Swansea University, married, taught in the Morriston area, and then eventually I came back here to the same house that I was brought up in. Now then, Jane wanted me to talk about the village and the quarry. And I thought, well, if I'm going to talk about the two, it'll be much longer than the 20 minutes she's offered me to talk about. So I'm leaving the quarry out altogether. There might be a time at a later date that she might invite me again, but possibly not after what I've said now. Right, now then, the village itself is very modern in a way. It's only been here for about 200 years or so, but there were little buildings, cottages around. Now, the oldest building that I found was Hen D, which is here. There were others. Pandy, that was the main farmstead here. And you also had Pandy Square, which is opposite the path where it is now. Then you've got Tŷ Iddaw. At one time it was called Tŷ Pridd. Tŷ Iddaw is Ivy Cottage. Next door to it, we have got Meirion House as it is now. But in the olden days, it was the Wesleyan Chapel in, I think it was 1825, that it was a Wesleyan chapel. And that was the earliest chapel in the village. There wasn't a church here then. What other houses? Oh, we had Tidalian, which is opposite the railway, not the water street. The field there is, we called it Tidalian Field, and there was a little cottage there, Tidalian, and apparently it was the oldest building in the village at the time. How old, I don't know. And very interesting, the word Tidalian, Lian, means a nun. Now then, why was there a nun there? We don't know if that's the correct meaning for it, whether there was a nun living there or not. But we had Cadfan at Tywyn. He had Cadfan Church in Tywyn, and he was walking from Tywyn all the way to Llangadfan, which is this side of Welsh Pool, and coming towards Dolgoch, you've got a farmstead which is called, I forgot the name of it now. You can tell me where Annie lives. Nantamanach. Manach is a monk and a nun.
Oh.
So whether there is something between those two, I don't know. Then you had Cadfan walking all the way to Llangadfan from Tywyn. He would walk above T Gwyn up onto the mountainside there, opposite where Gwynedd lives. You've got Llwybr Cadfan, which is a path. Then you've got Pistill Cadfan and Eisteddfa Cadfan. Eisteddfa is a sitting place, and Pistill, water. Then you carry on to Gwynedd Roberts, where the quarry is now. Apparently there was a church there, but I haven't found anything in any books about it. But apparently there was a church there, and there was also a graveyard there. And when the quarry started, they moved the gravestones because they were being, well, in the way of the quarry. So they moved them and put them somewhere else. And they put some trees there. There is one tree there still today, and it's a monkey puzzle tree. And the gravestones are put there. But I haven't seen any sign of any gravestones or anything there. Then Cadfan would carry on, possibly over Pont Cleiron, over to Llangadfan in near Welsh Pool. And apparently, I was mentioning the church there. There was a very, very old Celtic church there. But again, whether that's correct or not, I don't know. Right, where were we? Oh yes, the oldest houses in the village. Now then, we go down over the bridge here, opposite the pub as we know it today. You got a hay shop, the old shop. That, at one time, was an old brewery. For the very few people living in the village, apparently there were about 12 households, and this brewery supplied them with whatever drink it was, I don't know, possibly mead, I don't know. Then cross over the bridge, and you come to the Hendra. Now, I don't know how old the Hendra is itself, but the earliest date I've seen is 1840, but I think it must have been there before that, and it could be that 1840 is when they did some renovations there. Then Hendra was the biggest farm in the area, and apparently there were 13 little homesteads on their land. And I don't think, no, there aren't any left today as farmsteads, but some of the buildings are still there, mainly up on the mountain and towards the quarry. And somewhere or other, I've written down, where are we now? The names of them all. Where are we now? Llwynedd Went, which is just below the the station. Put my glasses on. Tyneffordd, that is the other side of the road. You've got Tynnerefail, Tyneffordd. Then the other side, up on the top, you've got Maes y Gro. Then you've got Hen D. Tudalian, I've mentioned that. Bryniau Rwyn, up on the top here. Brondeg is further up towards Cantrabedd on the mountains there. Avoti. Hendra is the homestead, the main homestead during the winter time. Avoti is the summer house, and that was up on the top there as well. Trawscoed, again, that's up near the quarry. Moelre, again in the same area. Bearth Maini, that's up in the quarry area. Hen Tabarn, Tabarn, Old Tabarn. I remember that building being there, and I remember men that worked in the forestry came across in the walls a lot of bottles. Either there were beer bottles, I don't know, but there were bottles. But there's nothing left of that building today. And then you've got Cantrabedd, which is up on the quarry there. Right. What else was I going to say about that? Then, oh yes. Now then, the village, as I said, is more or less at the confluence of rivers. If you go back, well, we can't go back, millions of years ago, where the earth was covered or may be covered with ice, and then you had the ice coming down the valley, and it scooped into U-shaped valleys where the ice had been. And if it's a V-shaped valley, it's been shaped by rivers. Now then, why have we got a V-shape going that way and a U-shape coming this way? Well, if you, possibly none of you, unless the older generation will possibly remember, before the forestry was built, you've got Bwlch-gyfing, which is near the railway station here. It seems to be flatter there, and it's very narrow. And the assumption is that there must have been a landslip rather than a landslide, and both sides just came down, and then it was very narrow, and the river coming from at the Talyllyn down the valley couldn't go that way, so it's built up into a lake here. The river from up here then cut a track across towards Llanfihangel, and what we call that then is a river capture, and it's taken the river that way. And therefore we've got, in a way, three valleys here. Right, going down this valley, you've got a number of places. I've mentioned some of them to you. You've got Maes Trefnant, Pentre Maes Trefnant. That is a very, very old township. And I think there were probably 4 or 5 in this area going back to 1293. And that's going back a long time. There was one there, and they would pay their taxes to Maes Trefnant. Then there were possibly a number of little houses around, and they paid there. Another one was Cetres up here. They would pay to Cetres. Then we had Nancaw in Llanfihangel, and then we had Pennant in Llanfihangel again. And they would pay their dues to there, and probably then it went to the government or whatever it was at that time. Because there weren't any churches as such then for them to have their tithes. I'll come back to the tithe later. Where were we? Oh yes, we were going down the valley, and on the left-hand side where quarry siding is now, there was a little house called Arrow. And I got a feeling, no, I was going to say, yeah. Berwyn lived there. No, he lived across the valley at Gwynedd. Now then, the farmer or the man living at Gwynedd wasn't happy with the man living in the farmstead next to him, which was Tancoed Isab. And they quarreled, and the man from Gwynedd murdered him, killed him, and he threw him into the Arrow field. Then he tried to escape, and he thought, I'll cross the river at Abergynolwyn and go to Cardiganshire. But they wouldn't allow him to cross because he had blood on his clothes, and they refused to let him cross. So he came back and apologized and said, yes, I killed him. And he was hanged on the tree at Gwynedd. And I think he was buried at the field near Arrow. And the person that he'd killed, he was buried at Talyllyn. So much for that one. No, I'm sorry. I've been talking in English, haven't I? It's easier. Right, now then, where were we? Right, the rivers. We call it the Gwynedd. Why is it called the Gwynedd? Well, there are a number of streams that you've got Llyron, which is the main river that comes from behind the quarry. Then you've got the Gwmcwm, which is another little stream. Yeah, then you've got the Moelfre stream. And then you've got the Gwynedd. Now, the Gwynedd, I haven't been able to find the source of the Gwynedd, but apparently there is a little spring between the two old farmhouses, Hendrewallog and Nantllwyn Gwedd. And there's a little spring there, and the stream runs out, and it's called the Gwynedd. And they've taken the name of this river as the Gwynedd. Why the shortest one and the little one, I don't know, because the main stream from the top is the Llyron. Now then, the Sunny. When I was a child, it was referred to as the Batty, Avon Batty. And the Gwynedd and the Batty, it merged at the bottom by the court, and then it became the Sunny. But apparently Batty has gone, and it's the Sunny all the way from the lake. Now then, the rivers. Why? I just don't know. We're going up now from here, up the valley this way, towards Talyllyn. The first place we come to is next to the cemetery. What's the name of the place? Gwynedd. You live in Gwynedd, don't you? But the original house wasn't there. It was the other side of the road, nearer to the river Yaga coming down. That's the original place. And when they built your bungalow, they put it there and didn't take over the land that the other house had. Then I mentioned Ketris, which is the farm further up again on the left-hand side. Near Ketris, there was a turnpike house. We used to call it T Tyrpag. But, no, then what was it called? Can't remember it. Abergynolwyn, it was called. It was called Abergynolwyn, which is Ketris' smithy. But we always used to call it a tea turnpike. It was a turnpike house, and they used to charge a toll for people going past there on the way. The main road, this road that we know it today, wasn't there. They had travelled from Llanfihangel up the top road, and then they would come to the toll house, and they had to pay a toll. I can't remember how much, but I think if you were walking, you wouldn't have to pay. If it was a funeral and a cottage, they would go free. Animals would be charged so much. And the funeral would be going along to Talafin. Why Talafin? Well, there was a cemetery there, and the other side of the river, as we know today, the Court, and that side of the river, was in the parish of Talafin, whereas this side was in the parish of Llanfihangel. So they would go up the valley to Talafin for the burials. Now, Talafin, I don't know how old the church in Talafin is, but there was, at one time, in the about 1840-ish, there was an independent chapel the other side of the lake, between what we know now as the vicarage and the farmstead Pentre. And it was an independent chapel, and what they used to call it, from the Bible. I did write it down. Yes, Abergynolwyn, because there's a lake in the Bible, Llyn Gynasaret, and they called the chapel, or the man that was in charge of it, called it Abergynolwyn. So there we are, there's that. Then we go now to Llanfihangel, past the Gamar. Then you've got a Nant the other side, then you've got Rhiwlas. And apparently, Rhiwlas is a very, very old cottage. And apparently, in 1845-6, where we had the treachery or the treason of the Blue Books, where the English people came to Wales to see how well the children were learning. And apparently there was a school there at Rhiwlas itself, run by what we think was a soldier that had been at the Napoleonic Wars, because they had seen a bit of the world, and therefore the authorities thought they knew more about education than the ordinary people. So then I'm not going to the castle, that will be another story. Then we'll go to the farm, probably that Llanfihangel. You've got the church there. There was well, I think it's more or less fallen down now. There was an independent chapel there in 1840. I don't know how old the church in Llanfihangel is, but that church that we know of today isn't the original church. The original church was up on the way to Nantareira at the name of the little place was called, oh crunch. Do you remember what it was called? None of you. My? Cerrig-y-Felin. And it was at Cerrig-y-Felin. The original church was at Cerrig-y-Felin. And if you do go to Llanfihangel and look by the entrance to the church there and look up, and you will see some ruins there. There was a little homestead there. I don't know how many houses, but the church was there, and that was the original church. And also opposite the church there as well, you've got probably a few houses that were Llanfihangel village itself. Then the church is much older than the one at Talyllyn and older than the one at Gwynedd. I wouldn't say that it's older than the one at Tywyn. The only thing that's very old at Llanfihangel is the baptism stone. It's much older than the building of the castle itself. So that's going to be older than the castle was built originally by the Welsh in the 1220s, 1230s, and it was taken over or conquered by the Normans in 1293. So this stone is older than the building of the chapel, the castle. Where are we now? I'm wandering, as you can see, all over the place. The other side of the valley, you've got Pengarreg, then you've got Mariafel Fach, Mariafel Ganol, and Mariafel Bella. Now, Mariafel Bella probably is the oldest building on that road up there. And some people have been told that a relative of Abraham Lincoln, who became American president, lived there. But I very much doubt it. I very much doubt it. Because what people, I think, have mistakenly thought is that there was a man there. Well, he was born there, David Richards, and he worked in the little farms around here. And then he was very good at drawing. And then he emigrated, possibly with his family, to America. And they found out there that he was such a good artist that they sent him to Italy to learn his trade as a craftsman. And then when he came back from Italy after being there for 4 years, he dropped in the village and he was very surprised because when he left, there were only a few houses here. But when he returned in the late 1860s, that the quarry had started and the place was full of houses. So that's another place which isn't there today. Below Mariafel Fach, near the river, there was an old cottage there. But there's nothing left there. And I got somewhere here the name of it. If Maya wants to know what it's called, you have to come to the after. She's taking notes. I know what she's going to be up to after this. I don't think Maya knows who I am, do you? There we are. I've been at it for about half an hour, Jane. Do you want me to carry on? And I haven't touched really on the village.
5 minutes?
I'll have to come again.
Yes. And then we can do questions, because I think there'll be a lot more to say when we get the questions as well.
Right. Well, as I said earlier, the village as it was is only about 200 years old, as it is now, because you had all these old houses, and then once the quarry came, they had to find buildings for the workers. So the McConnells started building houses here. The first lot were Llanecklyn Street, and they were called T-coed. Why? Because the frame was wood, and the frames had come from buildings that they had hoped to take to Crimea during the Crimea War. And the Crimea War was over by 1854, maybe. And I presume the frames for these buildings were there. So they, probably the McConnells bought them, and they used them for Llanecklyn Street. And that was the first street that they built in the village here. And they were called Ty-coed at one time, wooden houses. Then you had Water Street. I think it was 1865, Llanecklyn Street, 1866, Water Street. And then a year or two later, they built Tannebryn Street. And chapels. Let's go to the court. The court wasn't part and parcel of the village, because it was the other side of the river. It was there in the early 18th century, 1700, something like that. And there were about a dozen houses there. They had a tannery there near the river where the bridge is. And the bridge, we know it as Pont Court. It was called Tannery Bridge. Pont Court, we call it. Tannery Bridge, it was called, because there was a tannery right beside it. And the ladies from the court, they had to get oak bark to clean and colour the skins that they were using in the tannery. And they would get wood and the bark going up the valley here. They'd cut trees down and bring the bark down. And they were charged by the local landowner, whoever he was then. And they said, oh no, it's common land and all that. But they carried on doing it, and eventually he got a restraining order, and they had to pay them. And they just carried on paying their dues. There was also a brewery there at the bottom of the hill, a broca opposite where Raymond lives now. There was a little building there, and that was another tannery, which that was there before the rest of the village. And that's where Priscilla supplied the court. Then at the court, there was a chapel there, a Methodist chapel. Mary Jones from Llanfihangel used to walk there with her mother and grandmother. Children weren't allowed in, but Mary Jones was allowed because she was walking and helping her mother and grandmother. So she was allowed in. No seats, they had to stand. And they thought if they sat down, they'd go to sleep. So And if anybody was leaning against the wall, they thought, oh, somebody's going to sleep. That was the first chapel in the village. Then with the quarry, the Methodists built Jerusalem. Already there was a Wesleyan chapel here. I mentioned Ivy Cottage. Next door, you've got Marion House now. There was a Wesleyan chapel there. That was a very small one. They moved to the present Wesleyan chapel after the school here. The Independents, Annibenwyr, they didn't have a chapel, so they bought the one in the court from the Methodists, and then they built their own chapel. The church was built in 1878, and that was the last building. But we'll go to the other chapel that used to be here for a very short period of time, a Baptist chapel at Litchfield Terrace. Now, Litchfield Terrace was the first school that they had in the village here, and it was built as a one-story building, and it was too small. There were about 180, I think, children under the age of 12 living in the village at that time. So they applied for a bigger school, and the McConnells, who were Quakers, they paid for the building of this school as well. And that they moved there in 1883. That's when the school was built. Then Litchfield Terrace, they put another floor to it and had it as houses. Why is it called Litchfield Terrace? The reason why it's called Litchfield Terrace is because at one time, the tithe which they paid to the church was paid to the Bishop of Litchfield. Why the Bishop of Litchfield, I don't know. And that's why it's been called Litchfield Terrace. So, anything else? Or do you want me to shut up?
Shall we? I'm really conscious that there's such a lot to take in. I don't know about other people, but I'm so glad we're recording this because I feel like I need to go back.
How much are you going to pay me for this?
We'll have a whip round at the end.
No, for the recording.
Oh, no. Well, yes, you'll have to.
Intellectual property rights.
Indeed. Shall I suggest you have a bit of a sit down with a breather and a drink?
No, I don't mind standing.
Okay.
Well, I got my water.
I'm just thinking, because there's a lot to take in, and I'm aware that everybody in the room has probably got a particular area of interest that they'd like to ask questions about. So I just wonder whether we should maybe have 1 or 2 questions.
Before we go on, remember the old barn at the hotel here was falling down.
Yeah.
That used to be the old pub here called Troed yr Oen, the Lamb's Foot. Now, it wasn't listed. And so the people living at the pub wanted to take it down, and we contacted various bodies. I spoke to the National Park, I spoke to Cadw, and they said, oh, it's not listed. I said, why isn't it listed? It's the old building, one of the oldest buildings in the village. And they said, oh, we didn't get round to it. And they said that the only buildings in the village that were listed were Brent Street and a hay shop, which is opposite the pub now. And I said, why Brent Street? We don't know. And I questioned various other people, and they said that somebody living in Brent Street didn't want it changed at all, and they, because somebody was going to put new windows or something in there, and they badgered Cadw or whoever, and it was listed. And I said, why not the rest of the village, which is much older? There we are. I'm not saying any more.
Thank you. Thank you. What can we say? I'm just really, really grateful that you're sharing all that knowledge of the history with us. Because, it's just so dense, as I say. There's a lot to go back to, and I'm so pleased that we're able to.
Yeah, well, when I was at school, I did a lot of work on the quarry and a bit of the village, and when I went to South Wales, I took it all with me. Then when I came back, I thought, oh, I've got enough rubbish. And just went. And the only thing, I did take a lot of pictures of the quarry, and I only had 2 that I came across later. And one of them is on the board over there, of the big dam and the ponds, the Lleiron. And that's the only one I've ever seen. I haven't seen, and I've asked other people whether they've seen pictures of the Lleiron, and they said no, never. So I lent it to the Ganolfan to put up there, but it's mine really.
Right, shall we see what the where to start? Would anybody like to ask a question or ask Gwynedd to elaborate on any particular point that you've heard of so far? Or are we all a bit dumbstruck with Andrew? Would you like to?
How far from a school like that? Schools founded by McConnell's national school.
It was, I think it was a national school.
Even be under the Church of England then?
No, it wasn't a national school. What's the other one? It wasn't a church school, and it wasn't a national school. No, they were Quakers, and they were quite happy to give them money for good causes. And the children in the village, there wasn't a school. The literal school was far too small for them all. No, it wasn't a national school. I can't remember what it was, but it wasn't a church school at all. Nothing of that sort in the village.
So it wasn't a state school then?
No, it wasn't.
No, it wasn't. So it would be a private school?
No, it wasn't. Yes, it was a state school,
It was a
yes.
state school?
Yeah, whatever they had in those days.
Yeah, the mention about the Crimean War sounds fascinating to me. For instance, it appears that this village took the first opportunity of buying government surplus, army surplus, to build houses and that. So it'd be fascinating to know the design, what the sort of money they paid for it. I mean, that's a big story in its own right.
Well, you can research it. I'm too old now.
Join the club.
Yes,
look into that. It's fascinating.
Yes, the frames were all wooden from buildings that they had for the, I presume for the troops, the soldiers at the Crimean War. Whether they were brought back or whether they were built here and hadn't taken them out, I just don't know.
Yes,
but it's there's a 10-year difference between the end of the Crimean War and the building of the village.
Well, still, it was at the forefront of army surplus.
I actually read somewhere years ago when I first came down here that Tannybrim Street was actually built by some surveyor from London to make better class.
What the McConnells did was to use their own people from Manchester.
Yeah.
And the houses were of a better quality, than they had in the English working class areas.
Yeah, and they're sort of different sizes, aren't they? You've got the bigger ones one side and the smaller ones, and then as you get lower down, they get smaller again, don't they?
Yes. Well, Water Street, you've got 3 different sizes there. And again, the Tannybrim Street, this side, they're all the same. The top side is different, aren't they?
Yeah. Because there was a couple of shops, wasn't there?
Yes, you had the shop on the corner, and the quarry workers used to stop there on the way up to the quarry and to get something.
Because didn't they pay the rent to the McConnells, didn't they?
Yes.
So when they got paid from the quarry, they were actually giving money back.
Yes.
And the shop was run by the McConnells, wasn't it?
I don't know whether it was run by the McConnells, but they would pay rent.
Yeah, because it went round in a
Yes.
circle, didn't it?
And I think the first post office was in Tannerbridge Street. Is it Preswylfa, the biggest house along there?
Yeah.
I think the first post office was there.
Because the one on the corner, number 1, they've got the old they got the old like a hoisting that used to bring the stuff up
Yes, that's it,
to
yes,
the top,
yes.
haven't they? Yeah.
Yeah, the post office was there, and then I think the family from there married, and the daughter or whatever came to what we know now as the old post office.
Yeah.
The post office that you lot know is the one
On the corner.
on the corner, which is now bed and breakfast or whatever. That one moved there, then it moved to the other one, and the building in the middle was a cobbler.
Oh, right.
Yes, he was a cobbler.
I mean, you spoke about the tanneries, but there was the tanneries, there was another trade, wasn't there? They did in the village. I've forgotten what it was now. But there was another, there was a brewery, there was a tannery, and there was something else, wasn't there? There was a cobbler, wasn't there a cafe? There was another couple of cafes, wasn't there?
Oh yes, it was at the actually.
Yeah.
Yes, and what was the last paper shop post office now is was it a B&B or whatever it is?
Yeah.
That was a smithy at one time, and if you look at the building outside, the bottom stones are stones from the river rather than, and then the top part is, and the same with Myron House. The bottom part is big stones, and then you've got the
When did the powerhouse get built?
powerhouse, 1926. I
Oh, that
think.
was a lot later.
Yes,
wasn't it?
yes.
Yeah.
And the reason why they thought the smithy on the corner, they found a lot of what do you call it? The Welsh word is pedol. Horseshoes. Well, they weren't horseshoes. They were shoes for geese, because they used to walk geese.
Oh, I think that's
And they found a lot of those there, and they were walking geese to the markets.
Well, no, I was going to say, they also, as well as doing this spot thing for tanning, didn't they all keep pigs or something? in the
Well,
gardens?
that was at a later date.
That was a later
Yeah.
date, wasn't it?
Yes, once the McConnells, they gave them land. Well, they didn't give them land. It was land which was rented
Yeah.
as allotments, and a lot of them had to pick
Well, when the snake came out of the mine, wasn't it sent abroad to be dressed?
No.
It was
No.
dressed here.
Yes.
It was dressed here.
I'm just wondering, Maya, I'm aware that Gwynedd mentions Cadban, and also the chapel up at the quarry as well. But you did a story for us when we were during lockdown. Do you remember you did some story videos?
Yes,
for us?
yes.
And one was about a story about
Yes,
Cadban
it's the
Square.
one about Cadban getting lost
Yes.
in the mist as he was walking to Cadban.
Yes.
Oh,
that's
yeah.
And
how-
then he comes down in Cwm Cabian, the
Yeah.
other scene.
Yes.
So it's a mixing of fairy stories with saints, dangerous things.
It's very, one of the things I've learned about this is that every time you ask somebody about the history, you hear a different story, and it's very hard to know what is the true history. It's,
Another thing, I think, what's his name, Jay, was it Jay?
Jacob.
Yes, he gave us a story about the dam bursting, didn't he? Well, some people thought that there was an old man living in the Pandy here. He was taken, some people say, to Tannerbridge Street, but that's the only the record I've had on him going to town registry, everybody says that they went to the Wesleyan Chapel. And, but I've never heard anybody say or seen anything that the village was devastated. So it could be that when the dam burst, it wasn't a big burst, because apparently somebody lived up in the quarry was there. It happened on a Sunday, there weren't many people there, and he ran down to warn the people here. Well, if it had really burst and the water was gushing down, he wouldn't have got down here. So I wonder whether it was just...
I do have a press cutting about it. There is a press cutting that I found in the National Library about that.
1911. It was mentioned in the Sunday Times.
Oh, well, it burst in 1880, that's when it happened.
Oh, there must have been another one.
I feel with sorry,
Well, just ask one. You talk about legends in the area, truths or untruths. The legend of Devil's Rock is an interesting one, isn't it? You know, we've walked it many times, and there's a rock up there called Devil's Rock, which apparently all the various parishes used to meet there and cavort.
Yes, well, I didn't bring any of that.
Yeah,
Yeah, that's where. I know a little bit about it. But,
well, that's all I heard, that the various parishes would meet up there, not supposed to, and cavort. So the devil got so upset that he was stamped on this rock, and there's sort of a hoof mark there.
Yes, that's it.
Which obviously someone's put in there. There's people in the village who inscribed their on the shepherds, because your grandfather's
great uncle.
great uncle's
is
covered there as well. So
yes, there are a lot of people over
yeah. So maybe it's all kept quiet, this cavorting, you know.
No, well, the thing is, I can't tell you everything that has happened and I know about. I've already spent far too long.
Okay, is this a good time for us to pause and have a top up with a cup of tea and people can sort of speak to Gwynedd individually? Would that be a way forward, do you think?
Gwynedd?
How do you feel? Is that okay? Everybody ready for a cup of tea? So, should we sort of have a 10, 15 minute
Gwynedd?
time?
Gwynedd?
Sorry, so
No, you get them to have their cup and then
all right.
otherwise you still be.
All right, well, look, you can speak to Gwynedd while we're having our cup of tea if you want to. So 10 minutes and then we'll reconvene because I would like to speak to you about the electrons. Thank you.